Welcome to Inside Auto Podcast, where we feature everyone and anyone you'd want to talk to in and out of the automotive industry.
Ilana Shabtai here, host of Inside Auto Podcast, where we interview top dealers, GMs, marketers, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders in and out of the automotive industry. And before we introduce today's guest, this episode is sponsored by AutoLeadStar.com. The AutoLeadStar platform is built on a technology so powerful it allows you to market, sell, and service cars as you would in the real world at scale and online, making one-to-one matches between shoppers and inventory. AutoLeadStar is the only platform that is powered by scale, speed, and specificity to change the way dealers do marketing. So excited to welcome today's guest, Brian Kramer. I'm sure most of you who are listening have listened to him, met him. Excited to have such an industry expert and leader with us today. Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful down here in sunny Florida.
Yes, I can attest to that.
Same as you.
Yes. Excited to have someone else from Florida on the podcast. For those of you who don't know Brian, he is the General Manager of Germain Toyota in Naples. He comes with over 26 years of automotive experience and is a recipient of many automotive awards, including Automotive News 40 Under 40. So congratulations on that. He's basically a digital star. So when it comes to running his automotive business. So we're going to talk about that. He's going to share some of his secrets. Let's start with just talking about how you got into automotive. We love talking about that on this podcast because everyone has such a good story. So tell us how you rolled into automotive.
So in high school, I was a lot porter at an Oldsmobile dealership. I know not a lot of people are old enough to remember Oldsmobiles and cars like that, but I enrolled in Ohio State and realized very quickly that the people that were selling cars were going to be making double or triple what I'd be making with my degree. So I decided to take that summer off, and that summer led to 26 years later. I still, haven't gone back, but it's still on my bucket list.
That's what we love about the automotive industry, right? Though you don't need, it brings in people for who they are. I absolutely love that. You don't need a degree. Oftentimes it gives people who don't have the opportunity to get a degree to really make money and learn and grow. And I'm so proud to be part of the automotive industry when I hear stories like that. So I don't know if you have.
Oh, I am.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Brian.
No, I was going to say, I got into the nightclub business around that time. And I was in the nightclub business with a Major League Baseball player back then. And it didn't go the way that it was supposed to. So I had to pay back the debt. It was very exciting for a point, and then it went it was a lot of adversity. Mm-hmm. And the only way quickly that I could figure out how to pay back those debts was through the car business. So it stretched me out to a point that I didn't even know existed. But that's the nice thing about the car business is the harder you work, the more you get paid. It's not, just salary. And if you want to throw yourself into it, you can.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I was actually, and we'll talk about Clubhouse. I've been talking about Clubhouse and all these podcasts just because it's really blowing up our industry right now. But I was in a podcast, I was in a Clubhouse room called The Automotive Industry Saved My Life. I don't know if you got a ping about it.
Yes.
I went in for a little. It was really nice. The energy was awesome. People were telling amazing stories. So that you totally can identify with that, which I absolutely love. And
it literally did save my life.
Yeah.
Mr. Germain, who I still work for, I left for a while into AutoNation, but he's the one, he carved out a roadmap for me and exactly what it needed, because I was in a bad situation, and it was bell to bell for, 2.5 years, every single day, nonstop. And then at the end, I wanted to take a breather and wanted to just chill because I was about to collapse. And I think I had just turned 21 or 22. And I said that, I'm going to take it easy. And he said, well, I want to, promote you into management. And had I not been pushed like that, it wouldn't happen that quick. And then I became a general manager at 24, and I had a couple stores at 26, and
wow,
4 franchises. And, by the time I was 30, and then I left and went to AutoNation.
And then you came back.
Yep.
So maybe he has, maybe he hasn't, but how has Mr. Germain's management leadership style, how does that influence how you manage today, if at all? I know that I've read a bit about your management style and clarity being one of the things that's most important to you. So I'd love to open that up if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, and he's a mentor. There's also a lot of other mentors when I was at AutoNation, and I've just been very fortunate to be around a bunch of amazing people throughout the whole auto industry. But I would say that my relation with Mr. Germain lately is different. Before, he was more hands-on and he was more, keeping me within the bumpers and trying to, keep me on a pretty tight leash, which was a pretty good call back then in my 20s because I needed it. But now it's more of one of empowerment. I use an analogy like Eddie DeBartolo Jr. with the 49ers. He really let Bill Walsh do some crazy stuff. And even when Bill Walsh was going 2-14, he didn't try to micromanage him. He trusted Bill and he trusted the process. And I wouldn't have been able to do, the team wouldn't have been able to do most of what we've done down here without Mr. Germain's trust. And without him having that trust, and I keep him, I communicate with him in writing and so that he's in the loop. That's the one thing that he asked for, is that he goes, just keep me in the loop and tell me what the plan is. Give him clarity. So not only give the team clarity, but I give him clarity since it's his money as to what we're doing, what the plan is 3 months, 6 months, 12 months out. That way he's always in the loop and he's never blindsided and there's no daylight between he and I.
Yeah, empowerment is so important because you got to make the right decisions, and you also have to make mistakes and learn from your mistakes. So I totally appreciate that type of management style. And you've actually been killing it. So you could just write to him, we're killing it.
Well, it's nice. It's easy to look back in retrospect like that. Yeah. But I will say in 2017 and 2018, we weren't. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like the analogy I use is it's like a bone that was broken that needed to be reset. And if it's not set correctly, the doctor has to re-break it. And the re-break is always significantly more painful because it's intentional. It's coming. And then to heal again, nobody wants to go through the re-break, which I think is the biggest problem with digital transformation, is that the bone it's not broken, but it's not maybe set perfectly. And nobody wants to go through and just re-break it to make the necessary changes in order to have it heal back stronger to be ready for the next 10 years.
I love that. So can you tell us a little bit about that process, how you got out of that and what really made your dealership become successful?
Well, it was all about clarity. It was all about accountability. It was all about people. It was about recruiting the right people. And then and we didn't always make the right choices along the way. And a lot of the choices, including especially the ones that I made, weren't always the right. But no matter what, we're going to be going forward. We're not going to slow down. We're not going to be indecisive. We made some decisions. Some of my decisions were the wrong ones. Some of them were the right ones, thankfully more right than wrong. But all along the way, I'll give you a couple examples. We tried to have a BDC, then not have a BDC. Then are we going to do it cradle to grave? What's the right combination? Do you have the right people in place? Because with every single situation, if you have the right quarterback, you can run a passing offense. With the right running back, you're going to run a rushing offense. And I think every dealership is unique, and there's no template, cookie cutter way that you can run every single dealership. There's good and bad you can take from everything. And a lot of the stuff that we did was me asking friends of mine and peers, how do you do this? In this situation, what would you do? And including the management here in a lot of that buy-in, because they have to have buy-in. It has to be their idea. But the one thing that I wasn't willing to budge on was the culture, and I wasn't willing to budge on the standards. And even though, like when I got here, we were running, below $1,000 per copy finance PVR, and we set the standard at 1,700. Now that's over double. And from the outside looking in, it sounds a little out there, but everything was kind of like that, where we weren't yet there, but the anchor was going to get set, and we weren't going to budge on it. And that's really the job of a GM or a leader, is to sell the management team on the vision, even when from their perspective, it's absolutely crazy because they've never seen it and it doesn't make sense, is to be able to take that vision and translate it into reality. And if you think about Walt Disney, when he bought all that swampland in Orlando, he's painting a picture of a castle and what this is going to be. And they're going to come in on a ferry boat, and everybody's looking at 3 feet of swamp water, across 43,000 acres. It's tough. You have to have a certain way to get everybody to visualize that and have them, join you on that journey.
Totally. So wait, just because I'm curious. So what's your BDC situation now? Do you have one or do you not have one?
We do not have one.
Not.
So we have a service BDC, but we in the sales department, it's cradle to grave.
Okay.
Which is it's a lot more difficult.
It is. I agree with that. And there's a lot more training and skill sets that you need to make sure that your people are undergoing at the dealership. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. Specifically how your numbers and show rates have been affected by that change.
Okay. So, we used to run like 4, 5, 6% e-close. We didn't have a good way to quantify it. I'm going back to 2016.
Okay.
We didn't have accurate data. It was more, and there's many dealerships I've worked in that are like this. It was more about defending why the behavior is okay, or being able to justify why everybody has a job. And this is okay, but the end result wasn't. So something has to be, either we're not quantifying the shows properly, we're not confirming the appointments properly, our data is not, we don't have clarity as to what is a duplicate lead, what's a bad lead, what's a good lead. So everybody's like, well, I figured this was bad and this was good, which is really the job of a leader, is to tell them these fall into this bucket, and this bucket. Right. But going deeper than that, when we blew up the BDC after having a BDC for a while, what I didn't think about is the fact that it had been so long that the salespeople forgot how to follow up, or they'd never been trained how to follow up, because the BDC was, agents were the ones that were getting all the training. So we transitioned some of them onto the sales floor, but some of them didn't want to do that. And it's almost like muscles being atrophied from not working out. Yeah. Like Neo in the Matrix, when he tried to stand up and his leg muscles didn't work. It was the same thing with their phone skills. Totally. They didn't have any, and I didn't. I'm like, well, how hard can it be? Well, it's really hard if you don't train them. So that was a huge setback that I didn't anticipate, because I figured it's just that they didn't want to, not that they didn't know how to. So that was a miscalculation on my part. And
so now you're investing in that training for your people to make sure that the process is in place.
So we do. So that training. So that's another great question. So back then, like in many big Toyota stores, we had 3 sales managers on the sales tower. Okay. Now, even in 2016, there wasn't that much fresh traffic. So as I started quantifying it, back then there was like 200 ops. But I said, if you take a look at the total opportunities, there's over 1,000 internet leads, and there's 200 customers walking through the door. Why do we have 90% of our management leadership resources pointing to the front door come as via a lead or the phone? So I said, we only need to have one person at the sales tower. And they said, well, that's crazy. But well, I can tell you, we have one person today. So I ended up taking out, and nobody wanted to do it. So it took me, in terms of burning the bridge, I had to get rid of first the chairs, and then they found other chairs. So then I lost my temper one day, and I ripped the computer out from underneath the particle board and threw it across the showroom. And, do you have any other questions? Right. I said, we're burning the bridges. That's no longer an option. Wow. There's going to be one person on the desk. There's going to be one person back in the bullpen helping, coaching, training, developing. And then we had another manager in the conference room that was pulling up, and it was a nonstop, which still is to this day, nonstop save a deal that just churns and it never ends. And we still have the same amount of headcount, but we just realigned the resources. And not many, I can tell you, they all hated it. But they love it now, but they hated that journey. Well, change is so hard. So the aversion to change is just a natural reaction, I think. But that's a great, I think, actionable here for people listening on how to just change things up in your dealership. We have dealers come in here all the time, talk about certain things that they've changed at their dealership. It's often digital. So I really appreciate that process people change that you shared with us today. I think a lot of dealers can learn from that. I really do. And it's been things that I've been hearing in Clubhouse, and I'll bring it up again so we can talk a little bit about Clubhouse. But I came from outside of automotive, so I really appreciate these modern day car sales, very automotive showroom focused rooms where I can just come in and listen. And I learned so much about what happens at the dealership behind the scenes. So I really do appreciate those rooms, even though I can't necessarily contribute so much. And I hear a lot of it, that seems to be a big challenge, especially the cross training, right? Someone who used to be in BDC and now on the sales floor, they don't want to get back on the phone, even if they might have the skill set for it. So it's stuff that, I'm hearing every single day. How have you been enjoying or not enjoying, and this is an assumption, but how have you been using Clubhouse? I love Clubhouse. I love it on multiple levels. I'm using it as a student to learn from other people in the automotive sector, but I've also reconnected with a lot of old friends. I hadn't talked to Grant Cardone in years, and bumping into him on there. And I'm jumping into like NFT and crypto and these other rooms. That I was in a room the other night talking to Steve Aoki about NFTs. And it was, I mean, I don't even know how you can flatten out the world to where that's happening. It's absolutely insane. The knowledge flow and the people you can interact in those rooms. It's beyond fascinating to me. And I'm asking, some of the top leading minds in crypto tokens and different Bitcoin blockchain technologies, what would they do with the automotive industry? And I take like 6 pages of notes on things that I didn't, and it brings me up to speed, kind of like again in the Matrix when we learned Kung Fu. I'm on there just absorbing all this data and this information on knowledge chains that I had no concept of. But when you talk about automotive, I started out in the business early, but I'm an old soul in this business now. I started out before really computers. That's how I got into F&I, because everybody was terrified of the computer and asked me if I knew how to use one. So that's why I became an F&I manager at 19, because nobody wanted to touch it, because you still were pulling credit on a quant machine, which you can Google that. I'm sure nobody even knows what that is.
I do not. I do not.
Right? I mean, it's a different meaning with quantum computing, but yeah, that's an old, I'm dating myself with that, but now I feel like I got an obligation to make it so that crack, I've done it all, good and bad, in the car business. It's not like I'm some, patron saint, but I don't want, this has been my life career, and a lot of the people in those rooms. I want to change that so that the people coming behind us don't have to be subjected to what I was subjected to. I had thick skin and I could handle it, but the amount of women in the industry, the amount of young millennials that are really, really intelligent, they don't stay in this business because you get so many closed-minded, old school ways of thinking. And I've been in the business as long as anybody. You think about Jim Ziegler, Mike Maroney, or Grant Cardone. He turned 63 this week. And those guys are on the bleeding edge of technology. So saying that they've been in the business too long is just an excuse. And it's not real. It's not valid. That's a choice, a decision that they make, because I've got 20-year-olds that are just as resistant to change. So that's just something that allows them to justify it a little bit better.
Yeah.
And all they have to do is make a choice that they're going to be part of the solution. But I also know all the adversity that I went through and subjected myself to go paperless. And by doing that, I wish that there was somebody else that I could have called to ask for advice throughout that whole thing. So I'm trying to share some of that. I know that, a lot of people won't take me up on it, but if I can make it easier for some people to not have to go through all that pain that I went through, then that's my way of paying it forward.
Well, I think that's also the beauty of Clubhouse, because we now have access to people like you, like Grant Cardone, all these amazing leaders in the industry that are opening up their minds and other minds, I think, because once they start talking about what they see as like effective change and innovation, I think more people will be open to it. So that's why I love Clubhouse, besides for the fact that I also get inside dealers' heads and understand a little bit more what happens in the automotive industry.
Right.
It's really...
You find out what people are about when they start getting challenged.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. And I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised by like the positive energy that these automotive rooms have, because it could go any way, these rooms. And they are, someone comes up and pitches for their first time, for example. There's a lot of positive feedback. They make everyone feel good. It's very constructive oriented feedback. So I do appreciate that. So I've been a big user of Clubhouse, and I appreciate you sharing with us how you've been using it. And I know I could talk to you for hours on all the stuff. Before we sign off, I want to hear about your efforts to go 100% paperless. And you brought this up briefly. You're pioneering, if I would so boldly say, 100% paperless transactions in automotive. And this is just something that I think really should have already happened. So I'm excited that you're you're spending so many resources, so much time on this. Share it with us. I'd also specifically like to know what it's been like to work through some of the regulations that might restrict you from doing something like this. So share it with us.
Okay. There's a lot
There's a
to
lot
that.
to
So
share.
it, it's obvious. It was something that was on the back burner, and ever since checking out at an Apple store in the late 2000s and having my, receipt emailed to me, and I was wowed. And I'm like, well, that's it. No, that's it. I don't have to go to the cash register. No. And
There
it was
is
such
no
a
cash
wow
register,
moment.
sir. That's basically what
Right.
it's crazy. Yeah.
And I thought to myself, and I was actually talking to Rick Germain's brother Steve, and I remember coming back and I said, could you imagine if we could do it like that in the car dealership? And he said, yeah, that'd be great. I forget what year that was, 08, 09 or whatever. And ever since then, it's been something, but everybody always says, well, how many more cars are you going to sell if you can do that? Maybe that's a nice shiny object, but is it really going to drive sales? We just got to worry about this month. We'll deal with that later. Somebody else will figure that out. So it's always been in the back of my mind. And even at AutoNation, they were trying to figure it out. And then when COVID hit, we had already been trying to work on, and luckily we had the culture in place, because I think the culture is the foundational principle, even though it doesn't seem like it would have any correlation with paperless. But if you don't have everybody aligned towards a common goal, and they don't know what the vision is, and they don't know what the end needs to look like and why we're doing this, because really the why to the salespeople, and there's a different why to the customer than there is to the salesperson than there is to the enterprise. And to my controller, it's the $3,000 that we're going to save in paper, and the $3,000 that we're going to save a month in Iron Mountain shredding. That's $6,000 a month, not counting the storage or having it up in the parts department or outsourcing or whatever it is. And that's just the pure monetary value. That is valuable to the CFO, to the controller, but it's not valuable to me. That's a C priority. And even though there's some savings involved, I mean, it's nice, but I could care less about that. It's more about the speed, the production, the throughput. For the salespeople, they can go from 10 to 17, which they have, sales per sales associate. It's going to save the salesperson's career, which everybody said, oh, that's a dying breed. At some point, computers, I've been hearing that since 1998, by the way, when AutoVitel came out, and they said that it was the end of the salesperson, and that's going to be the end of position. And that, you hear it every single year at any DA. But I believe nothing could be further from the truth. But we do have to strip away all their redundancy, the repetition, and all the things that they don't need to be doing that you can have done with AI and different, job tools. And by just using a blockchain type approach to streamlining their, so that they this to this, and they can't jump around for their own good. And when you standardize everything like that, first, you go through all the forms. Most dealers, when we did it, I said, okay, so let's look at this stack, this thick of all the forms. What do we need this for? What do we need this for? And it covers up the whole conference room table. Where does this go? And what do we do with it? And ended up getting rid of like 80% of the forms, because they go, I don't know. Those are like from 10 years ago. That's the way we've always done it, which are the most expensive words in business.
Yeah.
So streamlining that, first getting into a paper workflow to where you could do that. When COVID started, like I couldn't do what we did in the first quarter of last year right now because we're too busy. So there was that small window, to not waste that good crisis, to go back through and say, okay, this is the only time we're going to have the amount of time to be able to, take a process map and say, what should it look like if they were to go in an Apple store and model that journey here? And what does our journey look like today? And when you look at the two and you put them both on a whiteboard, it's terrifying when you look at the contrast of where we should be versus where we are. So then we just had to start identifying where are the biggest gaps, and let's shrink them. And we just, compartmentalized it down. And one goes to selection. And we found out that if you really want to go fast, you get them to select the right vehicle the first time. You spend a lot more time on the needs analysis, because when they don't, the biggest impact we have on closing ratio, I now know, is when we don't select the right vehicle. And that's, the pay plans aren't aligned towards that. The KPIs aren't, we're focused on closing ratio, demo drives, menu presentations, but selection is the most impactful thing. And the data doesn't, I still believe it does intuitively, but there's no data to support. And we've got, 15,000 transactions through Prodigy, our digital retail tool. There's no data to support that test drives have any impact on results. There's no just scattered data, but selection does. Selecting the right vehicle. When we select the right vehicle the first time, our closing ratio is like 65%. If we don't select the right vehicle the first time, it drops down into the 30s. That big of a drop.
Wow.
Mostly because then they want to leave. So, but that's one of the things don't spend a lot of time doing is really trying to figure out what it is they're trying to accomplish so that we don't have to switch cars. Whereas I was always taught to have a backup switch car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to have the patience and the energy to break down the process and find the follow-up points. Like I think that's unbelievable that you found that. And so now you are 100% paperless. If I wanted to buy a car right now from Naples, I would just do the transaction online. I would not have to signature or sign anything. I mean,
no, we could do it. You could do, I could text you everything and you could do it right now from Miami and we just ship the car to you.
I got to share one story because 3 years ago when I first moved to Miami, I went through this like Buick Encore phase. Don't judge me. And anyone who has it, for them. But I do have a friend that works for Porsche in North America. And he was like, every time I told him I wanted to get a Buick Encore, he's like, don't talk to me ever again. Anyway, so I almost got it from Lehman, I think. Lehman, it's a group out here in Miami. And I remember I really, really needed to get it done. I just wanted to have a car already. I didn't want to go into a dealership. I'm not quite sure why I didn't actually go to a client. But anyway, I'm talking to this guy. And we're doing the transaction and it's all on text. Like I'm calling him. This was, again, mind you, three and a half years ago. I'm like about to get this car, which would have been like the biggest mistake of my life. And he's like, okay, now you just need to come here and just sign something. And I was like, what? Like I'm working for a software company. I'm like, I was shocked. He's like, yeah, we need a wet signature from you. Like we need wet ink. And I was just, I remember just being like, I can't do this. Like, can I print it? Can I like e-sign it on a PDF and send it to you? Like I was like, can you come here? It was crazy. It was like 8 p.m. I'll never forget that. And then I never ended up getting the car. And in the end, it saved me that they didn't have the technology in place. But really for the dealership, it was totally detrimental for them.
So what month was this?
This was 2000. It was right when I moved to Miami. So it was 2017. What month?
So it was 2017.
Yes.
They didn't know. Because I didn't know.
Okay.
So I talked to Automotive News about this, and they said, how did you figure out the regulations and all that other stuff? And what happened was I just had more time. So they said we couldn't do it here locally at the DMV. My office said they couldn't do it. Everybody said we couldn't do it. CDK said we couldn't do it. And I go, well, how does what's the real, how you can buy a home on mortgage online? It's Quicken Loans. I goes, how does Quicken Loans do it? They do business in Florida. People here have done business with Quicken Loans. So I started researching Quicken Loans. I'm like, why is that regulated? So then I tried calling FADA, the Florida Automobile Dealers Association. And they said, I think that there is something going on with that. You'd have to go call Tallahassee. So I called Tallahassee and told them at the DMV, and they said, well, you need an EFS. And I said, what's that? And it's the same thing that you exchange data with in healthcare. And I said, you mean to tell me that there's a technology that doesn't exist? I'm thinking it's going to be like some huge breakthrough, needs to be patented or something, that nobody's aware of, that this is like this much of an emerging market. So I looked it up and DealerTrack had the patent for it. So I called CDK and I said, well, how do we get this to connect to this? And they said, yeah, I did. They said, that's it? And I go, yeah. They said, if they have an EFS, you can transmit it directly. Oh, so then next thing you know, it was like a week later that it came out. So that law across the whole country was never actually, it wasn't the regulation, it was the manner in which the personal information had to be transferred securely. And nobody was focused on that.
See, Bitcoin can help us with that. Crypto can help us with that.
You're right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And kind of the same philosophy to all that is the same thing that allowed us. I mean, ours is still like a MacGyver duct taped process behind the scenes, but to the customer, it looks like a seamless experience. So it's not blockchain yet, but it's the same philosophy where you can't go to the next step until this step. And that's the key. And not many dealers are willing to do that.
Right.
Because the salespeople go, this is too hard. This is such a pain in the ass. And they don't have a common language.
Because of it. They're totally losing. At that point, I was like literally seconds away from buying. I can't imagine that there are no similar stories. And even if it's a little messy on the dealer side, it's worth it. Once we get crypto in here in automotive, that's just going to be a no-brainer. I don't know much
Right.
about it. It sounds like you know a lot more, but I can understand the concept and how much it can actually help, especially when we talk about these transactions.
I just learned it this week on Clubhouse, so I'm just I'm learning it every day.
Yeah, I got to get into some of those rooms in Clubhouse. I have gone into some of like the stock market rooms in Clubhouse, but then I'm like, am I taking stock advice from these people? Like, who are these people? I don't know. So,
And they always have a disclaimer on it too.
Yeah, of course. I gotta find, I think, more rooms with a little bit more participants than the ones that I've been going into. But anyway, it's been such a pleasure speaking to you and getting to know you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was so much fun to talk to you. And for our listeners, I know you enjoyed this episode. Please tune in, Inside Auto Podcast. We will catch you next time. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to Inside Auto Podcast. Check out our other episodes with top entrepreneurs and industry leaders.